What's up, sports bettors? We are hunting down some player props for Raiders Chiefs. I think you're really going to like these two picks. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. Now, we're going to be looking at the fantasy sites. So PrizePicks, Underdog Fantasy, and ThriveFantasy. They all essentially do the same thing. So we've given out a bunch of plays on PrizePicks, Underdog, kind of discussed the similarities, the differences between each of these platforms. But we'll go through it briefly once again because it's so critical, right? And when you're looking at OddsJam and you're browsing odds, so for example, one of the first picks I have is McKinnon under 1.5 receptions on ThriveFantasy. And if you take a look at it and you don't understand the math, you're going to be confused. Why is ThriveFantasy minus 111, whereas Underdog Fantasy is minus 137 and minus 122? It's very confusing at first. So essentially, the reason that you see different lines for these sports books is just how they, are set up. So on PrizePicks, any two picks you select, you're going to see 20 to win 60, right? 20 to win 60. That's what you see for any two picks. 20 to win 60. Doesn't matter if you switch this to overs, unders. PrizePicks is a fixed parlay platform. Two picks, 20 to win 60. Underdog Fantasy is exactly the same. So if we go over to Pick'em, two picks, 20 to win 60. We switch this to an under, 20 to win 60. We head over to baseball, 20 to win 60. Everything 20 to win 60. Now what's cool about Thrive is they're actually 20 to win 72. So their payouts are higher, right? On Thrive Fantasy, you're getting 20 to win 72. So even though the interface is a little, maybe less beautiful than, let's say, on PrizePicks, they're offering you a lot better payouts, right? You pick 2 out of 2 correctly, you're getting 3.6 times your entry as opposed to 3 times your entry, which is what you get on Underdog and PrizePicks. So that affects the implied odds, which we've gone through in tons of other videos. So there will be an article in the description kind of about how PrizePicks works. I'll also include a video in the end screen about how all these fantasy companies work. But essentially, because Thrive Fantasy is 20 to win 72, right, which is just plus 260 odds. So if you go here, so you're getting back 3.6 times your entry, but that includes your stake. So for example, if we were to bet $100 on this, it's 100 to win 360, but 100 of that 360 is just our initial stake. So it's 100 to win 260 in profit, so that's plus 260 odds. So what we've essentially gone through before is just kind of a parlay calculator. If you're getting 100 to win 360, you're essentially getting, a 2-leg parlay where both legs are offered at the implied odds of minus 111. Any 2-leg parlay where both legs are minus 111 will come out to, plus 260 odds. 100 to win 360. So that's essentially what we're getting on Thrive Fantasy, right? Both legs are minus 111 implied odds. So the first play I ended up going with is right here. It's a positive EV play, and the profit margin's slightly lower. But hey, looking for a play for tonight, you can see there's a couple Mac Collins over 2.5 receptions on PrizePicks, Dubon to get on base. So we have a baseball play for tomorrow. So there's already some baseball plays for the MLB playoffs tomorrow. But on Thrive Fantasy, they offer the best payouts. So we're seeing, the best price. And what you'll notice is all the sports books, they have McKinnon under 1.5 receptions juiced towards the under, right? Pinnacle has this minus 127. BetOnline has it minus 125. DraftKings has it minus 130. Caesars has it minus 125. So we're using all this data kind of in the sports betting market to identify value, identify sharp plays, right? And essentially, the way you should be thinking about sports betting, the way I like to think about sports betting, is you treat all these bookmakers kind of like an independent, data point of where the line should be set. DraftKings is pricing this at minus 130, so they have the under favored to the tune of minus 130. Caesars is a little less bullish on the under, right? They're giving you minus 109 on the over, so they're giving you worse odds than DraftKings on the over, so they think the over is a little more likely. And they're giving you better odds on the under. They're giving you minus 125 as opposed to minus 130. But they still have the under juiced. So Caesars models still think the under in receptions for McKinnon is more likely to hit. So we have one, two, Bet Online, a really sharp offshore sports book. Same with Pinnacle. They both have the under juiced as well, to the tune of minus 127. So we're getting pretty good value at minus 111 on Thrive, right? Granted, not a ton. This definitely isn't the highest positive EV bet on OddsJam, which would be a sports bet. But regardless, there's some good value in McKinnon under 1.5 receptions. Just a positive EV play. So all the positive EV tool does, if you're, new to this YouTube, is it just kind of takes all the data in the market, right? So all the odds on OddsJam, millions of odds you have kind of updating in real time for all these different markets, point spreads, totals, stuff like that. All the positive EV tool does is say, hey, here is where there is value, right? So on Thrive Fantasy, this bet's showing up because they're giving us the under 1.5 receptions at minus 111 when every sports book is essentially pricing it at, minus 125 or higher. So really good value on Thrive Fantasy. This play is also available on Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks, but, we'd prefer to go with Thrive Fantasy always if they're offering the same prop as Underdog and as PrizePicks because they give you a lot better prices, right? It's really that simple. The purpose of the OddsJam YouTube is to cut through the BS and just make it very clear because you're getting a higher payout on Thrive Fantasy. Obviously, for a 2-pick entry, you'd prefer to go with Thrive Fantasy. And it would never make sense, even if you had 3 picks you liked, right? You'd prefer to place a couple different iterations of 2-pick entries on Thrive Fantasy as opposed to playing a 3-pick on Underdog Fantasy, again, just because the payout's higher. So ideally, you want to go with Thrive when the props are offered, kind of at the same level. But of course, you'll see some props that are only offered on Underdog or PrizePicks and aren't offered on Thrive. Thrive tends to have less player props available than Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks, but they offer better prices. So it's kind of like you have less things available to bet on, but they're at better prices. So the next play I ended up going with is Devante Adams over 75.5 receiving yards. So this is a play from the OddsJam middle tool. I think he had like 120 receiving yards last game. And all this middle betting tool does for you, like all a middle bet is, all it means is it shows you where sportsbooks are setting the lines at different levels, right? So maybe you see one sportsbook that has the OU for Devante at 75.5 yards, and then you can see Caesars, they have the over 78.5 yards, or they have his line at an OU of 78.5. So there's another middle here. You could have gone with Josh Jacobs under 60.5 rushing yards, but regardless, I ended up playing the higher middle, or Devante Adams over 75.5 rushing yards. This was a play I really liked. So another play with pretty clear value. Thrive Fantasy setting his line a lot lower than where the sportsbooks have it, kind of ranging from 78.5 to 80.5 depending on the book. So good value on Devante over 75.5 receiving yards. So not like the best play ever that we've ever had on Thrive, but still some good value for tonight. So I hit it for $50 to win 180. So 50 to win 130 in profit plus my $50 stake back. 2 picks on Thrive Fantasy. I'll look for some value on Underdog Fantasy and PrizePicks as well. We can see if anything's available later today. And let's make some money, guys.